The fiscal year 2015 appropriations bill for the Department of Homeland Security. Similar to the subcommittee's work over the past few years, the bill before us today demonstrates how we can fund vital security programs with both urgency and appropriate fiscal discipline. So this bill is about our security and fiscal priorities and getting them right. The President's fiscal budget for 2015 proposal for DHS presents a seriously distorted and harmful budget for our frontline Homeland Security agencies, disseminating their operational workforces and undermining the vital mission capabilities. The end result of the President's FY15 budget proposal would be far less capable DHS, and our subcommittee, on a bipartisan basis, found this outcome unacceptable. Instead, the bill in front of you addresses the very programs that are truly essential to our Homeland Security. In the interest of time, I will just provide a few noteworthy examples of what the bill includes. Nearly a $500 million increase to ICE to sustain and improve all aspects of enforcement, investigative, and detention operations, including an increase above the request of nearly $77 billion to help address the growing issue of unaccompanied alien children transiting our borders. Substantial increases to DHS's counter-narcotics, interdiction, and border security capabilities, including increases to CBP's air and marine operations and border security technology, and the Coast Guard's operating hours and acquisition. We fully funding E-Verify, full funding for the Department's cybersecurity programs, restoration and sustainment of the Secret Service's investigative capabilities, restoration and sustainment of FEMA's first responder grants, full funding for all projected disaster relief requirements, and funding to support the completion of the National Agro and Biodefense Facility in Kansas. But this bill also considers our nation's fiscal crisis by invoking real fiscal discipline and efficiency, including a 15% cut below the request to DHS headquarters offices and reductions to every DHS component managerial overhead, sizable reductions to ineffective offices and programs, denial of all unauthorized proposals to increase fees on the traveling public, and substantial oversight requirements ranging from withholding funds to statutory mandates to reporting requirements. And those reporting requirements deal with critical functions and items such as ICE detainers, major acquisitions, professional misconduct, the purchase and inventory and usage of ammunition and weapons. This bill does not represent a fatal choice between fiscal responsibility or false choice between fiscal responsibility and security. Both are urgent to our national security priorities. Both are vigorously addressed in this bill. I must note that once again, DHS failed to comply with the statutory requirements enacted into the law in FY14. Those failures are assertively addressed in the bill. This subcommittee is serious about compelling the department to both enforce the law and comply with the law. And we will not tolerate further failures in this regard, a point I think we make clear through zeroing out the Office of Legislative Affairs and the illusion of new statutory oversight requirements, inclusion of new oversight requirements. In closing, let me first thank Ranking Member Price. He has been a statesman and a true partner to work with on this bill. I sincerely thank him for his dedicated professional staff for their input and considerable contributions. In addition, let me thank the thoughtful members of this subcommittee. Your input was critical to this subcommittee's oversight work over the past few months, as well as the production of this bill. I know my staff and I made every effort to accommodate virtually every member's submission we received, and that has only made the product in front of us and in front of you stronger. Finally, I must thank the distinguished chairman and ranking member of the full committee, Chairman Rogers and Ms. Loy, your input and support of this bill is genuinely appreciated. I sincerely believe this bill reflects our best effort to address our nation's most urgent needs, security and fiscal restraint. I urge my colleagues to support this measure and look forward to working with you as we move this bill through the legislative process. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have about the mark, but before I do, I would like to recognize our ranking member, Mr. Price, and then our full committee chairman and ranking members for comments they would like to make. Mr. Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin by commending you and your fine staff for leading another open, collaborative, and bipartisan process in constructing the appropriations bill the subcommittee is considering this evening. We're not ever going to agree on every issue or funding level, but you and your staff have consistently worked with our side of the aisle in good faith, and you've accommodated members of both parties in many, many instances. So I'll be supporting the chairman's mark this evening, and I encourage my colleagues to do the same. We're fortunate to have a healthy allocation, especially as it compares to the budget request, which is $837 million lower. But more importantly, our allocation is healthy relative to the department's needs, with one major exception having to do with the classification of most of the National Protection and Programs Directorate as defense spending. While I'm pleased that the subcommittee has an adequate allocation, we should not forget that a healthy allocation for this subcommittee comes in the context of wholly inadequate allocations for most of the other subcommittees. As a result, the majority does not invest adequately in National Science Foundation research in the Commerce Justice Science Bill. Virtually every housing and community development program is under-resourced. And a reasonable labor HHS education bill is not even an option, given their 302B allocation. At some point, the House majority is going to need to accept the fact that our strength is measured not just in border personnel or the number of Joint Strike Fighters we purchase. It's measured in the number of scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs we produce to drive the growth of cutting-edge industries. It's a matter of the advances our research makes against dread diseases and making our infrastructure once again the envy of the world. Yes, our strength and security can be judged by security along the border, but it can also be about, it must also be about, the investments we make in our people and our economy in the 21st century. So let me stress, while not every subcommittee allocation is equally inadequate, the problem goes beyond the merits of any subcommittee's allocation, let alone individual line items. The House majority stood in the way of the sort of broad budget agreement that balanced the budget in the 1990s. The House has failed to seriously address the main drivers of our deficit, namely tax expenditures and entitlement spending, returning again and again and again to appropriations, especially critical domestic investments, to bear the whole brunt of deficit reduction. The result's a disaster for our economy and for the work of most of our appropriations subcommittees. Let me be clear, I did support the budget agreement that established the top-line funding level because it gave us some certainty about how to proceed for both the current year and the coming year. It was better than sequestration, it was better than government shutdowns, but not by much. We're now seeing the reality of appropriating to an arbitrarily set number that does not realistically comport to what executive branch departments and agencies truly need to carry out their essential programs and activities. When the rallying cry of fiscal discipline becomes divorced from the reality of fiscal need, our country's in trouble. And so is the institution in which we serve. So while I appreciate the majority's plan to push forward with all 12 appropriations bills, we should not pretend that all 12 have the resources necessary to meet our challenges as a nation. All that being said, the mark before us does address several democratic priorities with respect to Homeland Security, including maintaining the current funding levels for first responder and anti-terrorism grants and for research and development activities in support of DHS operations. It also provides increases above the request for frontline personnel so that they can continue to conduct critical operations along our borders, protect our nation's airports, seaports, and land ports of entry, coastal waters, and commercial air flights, and respond to natural disasters across the country. The bill provides the final funding increment to construct the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility, NBAF, which will provide significant new research capability to help prevent the introduction or spread of the most serious animal diseases. In addition, the bill increases funding for critical Coast Guard and CBP air and marine acquisitions to recapitalize aging assets, while also bringing the latest aviation and vessel technologies online to ensure our frontline personnel can operate more effectively, improving on the administration's request on each of these fronts. On the budgeting and acquisition front, I fully endorse the Chairman's efforts to push the Department to establish more rigorous, consistent, and comprehensive processes to ensure that budgets are based on mission requirements and fill critical capability gaps, that acquisitions are based on careful capability gap assessments and alternative analyses and are supported by coordinating research, development, testing, and evaluation efforts, and that budgeting is carried out based on a comprehensive department-wide perspective and acquisitions are based on department-wide priorities. Secretary Johnson's pushing hard to move the Department in this direction, so the funding and the directives in the Chairman's mark will help, I believe, greatly facilitate the Secretary's efforts while also holding the Department accountable for delivering. I do have some concerns with the bill, notably some of the immigration provisions. I've said for many years now, setting an arbitrary minimum of 34,000 ICE detention beds, especially in this fiscal climate, denies ICE the flexibility it needs to manage its enforcement and removal resources in response to changing circumstances, and the ability to use cheaper alternative forms of supervision when appropriate. Sometimes we forget ICE detention is not a form of punishment. It's simply a means to ensure the removal of aliens who are flight risks or dangers to public safety if they are ultimately determined to be removable by an immigration judge. Setting an arbitrary minimum of detention beds is a double whammy of bad policy and wasteful spending. I'm also concerned that some of the other increases in ICE accounts above the current levels may be excessive when compared to other needs and priorities, not only in this bill, but in the other subcommittee bills with inadequate allocations. The bill also provides no funding for the new DHS headquarters already under construction, despite $73 million in the request. We've been told repeatedly by the administration that deferring these investments will greatly increase the project's costs, and I believe they're absolutely correct. In closing, I want to again underscore my appreciation for the efforts of the Chairman and his staff, of our own staff on the minority side, to work with all of us throughout this bill. Our members have been accommodated, and we appreciate this style and this spirit of cooperation. And, of course, we appreciate the Chairman's efforts through this mark to sustain our frontline Homeland Security operation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Price. We now recognize Chairman Rogers for his comments.
And staff for the collaborative effort that you've put forward. In the best spirit, I think, of bipartisanship of this committee and for fiscal sanity. As you know, this bill is near and dear to my heart since I formerly chaired the subcommittee, in fact, the first chair, along with Mr. Price. And I appreciate that you've maintained the spirit of collaboration and bipartisanship. That's always been the touchstone of this subcommittee and the work that you've completed this year. $39.22 billion, you emphasize fiscal discipline and oversight and addressing a number of cross-cutting flaws in the President's budget request. By placing a priority on operations and enforcement, this bill provides the Department with sufficient support to focus on two of our biggest challenges, counter-narcotics and border enforcement. The budget request would have left the Coast Guard at a 5-year low for drug interdiction at a time when our country is confronting a precipitous rise in heroin overdoses in all sections of the country. I'm very pleased that you've restored some of these cuts to Coast Guard's operations, including a 5% increase in aviation and cutter hours to continue the battle against illicit drug trafficking in the Caribbean especially. The bill also supports our men and women on the front lines at Customs and Border Protection, restoring significant cuts to air and marine operations by providing $79 million above the request and including an additional $50 million for border security technology. With this bill, too, Mr. Chairman, you've taken great strides in addressing a hidden shame, and that's addressing the emerging but critical challenge of unaccompanied alien children being smuggled across the border by the tens of thousands. In the last several years, there's been an exponential rise in the number of undocumented alien children from 6,600 in 2011 to an estimated 66,000 for fiscal year 2014. And that's supposed to grow in 2015 to more than 127,000 unaccompanied children. But sadly, no leadership from the administration in addressing this trend in the budget and taking care of this growing and sordid problem with smugglers making zillions of dollars smuggling these unaccompanied children to illegal parent aliens in this country mainly. This subcommittee has included $76.9 million above the request so that ICE personnel can safely transport these children for their referral to HHS Office of Refugee Resettlement. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a growing problem of immense enormity and terrible hurt, and it's rewarding those smugglers in Mexico by leaving them zillions of dollars for these sordid acts. The bill makes the use of taxpayer dollars and holds DHS accountable for these resources with spend plan and reporting requirements, staunch acquisition oversight, and a number of staffing requirements. So I want to congratulate the chairman and the ranking member and the members of the committee and staff for this bill. I think it's a good one. As Mr. Price has said, the allocation I think is fair, and it's almost identical to the current year. But also, I'm very pleased with the depth of oversight that this subcommittee is holding the department to in bringing before you the secretary and all of his assistants and asking the hard questions, holding them accountable, and in places withholding funds until they comply. That's true oversight. That's one of the main purposes of the Appropriations Committee, and I'm glad to see you're carrying that forward in your bill. Now yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Loy.
Well, I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had the pleasure of serving on this subcommittee, and the bipartisan efforts of its members truly helps to strengthen our security. And I thank Chairman Carter, Ranking Member Price, as well as the committee staff for working together to produce the bill before us today. At about $887.8 million above the administration's request, yet $50 million below current funding levels, it makes a series of important investments, including sustains funding for FEMA state and local programs at $1.5 billion, including $600 for the UASI program and $466 million for state Homeland Security grants. Maintains funding for fire grants totaling $340 million for the SAFER grant program as well as an additional $340 million for the assistance to firefighter grants to ensure that our first responders have the training and equipment they need to save lives. Provides $94.5 million for alternatives to detention, which matches the request and is an increase of $3 million over current funding. Provides additional funding for ICE to increase child exploitation investigations. Language I requested directs the Coast Guard to report on the use of expedited transfers for victims of sexual assault. Too many of our service members have faced this horror, and for many victims, the pain continues as they are forced to be stationed with, and in some cases work alongside their assailant. Victims of sexual assault in the Coast Guard, like those serving in the military, deserve the right to transfer without harming their careers or service. Of concern, the bill would cut funding for the federal air marshals by $200 million, while making significant cuts to cybersecurity activities, including a 25% cut to the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, which has become the go-to center for state governments to assess their cyber risk and combat cyber threats. The inclusion of $205.7 million for the misguided policy of mandating a set number of detention beds wastes valuable money that could best be used elsewhere to protect our nation. In closing, I reiterate my appreciation for the Chairman's efforts. This is a reasonable bill I hope will remain free from poison pill riders. I know the Chairman and Ranking Members share my hope that agencies tasked with these vital security functions get responsible funding levels. Thank you.
Is there any general comments or debate? Ms. Glover-Alley.
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to join my colleagues in thanking you and Ranking Member Price and the Minority and Majority Committee staff for the spirit of bipartisanship in which this bill has been written, and for the work of the committee. And I'm particularly grateful for the willingness of the Chairman and the Ranking Member to accommodate many of my requests. In particular, I would like to highlight the heartfelt concern that the Chairman has expressed for the plight of the Central American children, as has the Chairman of the full committee, those children who are arriving at our borders having fled violence and extreme poverty in their home countries. And I look forward to continuing to work with the Chairman and the committee to find ways how we can better address this dire situation and to ensure that the children, when they do arrive here, are treated humanely and receive the care and the treatment that they deserve. I just want to associate myself with some of the comments that were made by Chairman Price, but particularly I'm hoping that at some point maybe we can address the issue of the requirement of the 34,000 beds and at some point. But overall, I believe this is a very good bill and that it provides the tools that are needed by the Department of Homeland Security to protect the American people, and I thank you for that.
Mr. Cuellar.
Mr. Chairman, I also say thank you for work and the Ranking Member, Mr. Price, have done, and the staff on both sides, and certainly I want to thank the great work on this issue. I just don't want to get into much detail. I think we can do it later, but the unaccompanied kids are coming in through a large part of it through my congressional district, and I'd be happy to show you some photographs so we can put a face to what's happening. Basically, in the Rio Grande Valley, there's about 1,200 that they're apprehensions a day, 1,200. That doesn't count the ones that get away, but just the 1,200. About 300 a day are kids that are coming in, and you can see the photographs that are coming in. They're males, females, kids ages 14 to 17, family units are coming in also. And it's causing a situation. I know that under Homeland, we can only address part of it. I hope we can work with our friend Kay Ranger to deal with it. As you remember, Chairman Rogers, when we're down there, I hope we can work with the Mexicans on the southern strategy, because what's happening, they're just coming in at a large rate. And if you just imagine what's happening, if you're worried about the 12 million undocumented persons, do the math. 300, just the kids, 300, and a lot of them are coming in for several reasons. I'll be happy to share some detailed information. But if you just multiply that, and I know we don't have the catch and release anymore, but on the OTMs, by the way, 70% of this 1,200 a day are OTMs other than Mexicans. And as you know, it's a different process. So what's happening is that they are being released. And they're putting them together with the families. So if you get the 12 million, add families, and just keep adding this every day, then I think you can get an idea. And they're not only male adults, but as you can see, there's family units. And I got a lot of photographs, and I'd be happy to share a lot of this information with y'all. But the capacity that the Border Patrol is handling right now, they're in a very difficult situation. I got to hand it to the men and women that are in green, but you got to still deal with ICE and the enforcement and removal and the refugees, Health and Human Services, and there's a lot of units that we got to look at. I know we're only handling the transportation part of it, but the detention part of it is something that we need to look at. I know that it's controversial, but I'm one of those. I feel that either you catch them and you release them, and you keep adding to the 12 million that we have already. So again, I don't want to go into it, but I do want to say, Mr. Chairman, I think you and David Price have just done, and the staff have done an outstanding. I'll be happy to share some of these numbers, but Mr. Chairman Rogers, I would ask you, as the chairman and Nita Nori, this is only Homeland, but there's other agencies that we got to coordinate together because there's a lot of reasons what's happening, and again, you know, right now they're just getting, some of them, you know, there's not enough diapers, there's not enough food for them, there's no baby seats to move them around. I know they're going into another part of my district, the northern part of the, well, it's outside of my district. It used to be in my district in Lackland. They're keeping some of them there, so it's costing a lot of money. And on top of that, just keep this in mind. The Border Patrol that I spoke to this weekend said that it takes about 2 hours to process an individual. 2 hours. So you just multiply the hundreds and the thousands, and when they're working out the paperwork, they're not on the front line because they're doing the paperwork. So just multiply roughly 2 hours per individual, and that'll give you an idea of what's happening. So again, I want to say thank you. Y'all did a fantastic job. I want to work with y'all, and I'll be happy to share this photographs with anybody so you can see what I'm talking about. It's an abstract and putting a face to the abstract numbers.
Well, Joe Yield.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the trip that you and I and others did into Mexico. And the Mexicans are as concerned about this problem really as we are, because as you say, 70% of the kids we're talking about are other than Mexicans. They're coming up into Mexico from the south. And the Mexicans are genuinely interested in trying to stop that invasion of their border on the southern side. Can you tell us where we are with that collaboration with Mexico on that problem?
Yes, sir. On the southern strategy, as you know, we always talk about protecting our southern border, but I think we need to go beyond and look at the southern border of Mexico, because I've always said this, and I think we're all in agreement. Right now we're playing defense on the 1 yard line. And I think if anybody that's familiar with football, I'd rather play defense on their 20 yard line than instead of our 1 yard line. This is something that we're working with Chairwoman Kay Ranger and with Nita Lowry, so we can talk about the southern strategy, and that's still being developed, as you know. But again, either we play defense on the 1 yard line or we play defense on the 20 yard line. And again, Mr. Chairman, just think about this. 1,200 a day, this is only the lower Rio Grande Valley, and that doesn't include Laredo. Because the overload they're having right now in the lower Rio Grande, they're transferring 400 a day to the Laredo area. And that doesn't include Lackland, doesn't include El Paso, doesn't include Arizona. And that's money, taxpayers' money. And again, if we just spend a little bit of money on the southern border of Mexico, I think a lot of this will be looked at very different. And by the way, one more thing. The drug organizations, I asked why they're coming in through South Texas. A lot of it's not their choice, but it's the smuggling organizations that are deciding where to take these people. And for some reason, they feel, whether it's a perception that they have down there, they're going through this area. But again, we can talk about it because they just called us for a vote. So, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you and David Price and Chairman Rogers and Laurie for the great work and the staff. But we can talk about it in detail. I'll be happy to show you any photographs so you can put a face to the abstract numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Cuellar. Is there any other discussion or comments? Let me say that we checked with the Border Patrol for the last 3 days. It's 1,400 is what they've done this week a day. It's a flood. And in addition, I'm sure you're aware of the 2 bridge surges that they had, and one in Laredo, and I'm not sure where the other one is, where they came across 50 at a time, just walked across the bridge and turned themselves in. It's quite a flood coming across, and it's overwhelming. We're not only transporting to Laredo, we're transporting to El Paso, to Tucson, clear to California. And the situation at Lackland, I talked to the secretary today. He was personally involved in getting Lackland involved because he's an old DOD man. He made some calls to some people at DOD and was able to get a place where we now have approximately 1,000 miners at Lackland. It takes about 45 days a miner to process them. So it's an ongoing crisis. And the issue with the diapers and all that stuff, that's at the Border Patrol level. They're not set up. It's not that they don't want to give these people the stuff. They're not set up to deliver it. That's why they're trying to get them to HHS and relocation as quickly as they can, because they are set up to do that. And this is really, it's one of the biggest invasions we've had in quite a while. So it is a crisis. And let me, while we're at it, where is that thing? Oh, I'll do that in a minute. Here it is. While we're talking about the Border Patrol, when I was talking to the Secretary, he informed me that today, he talked to me and he informed me that today a Border Patrol agent was killed in the line of duty. While the exact cause is still being investigated, tragic events remind us all that there are inherent dangers in our business, and the brave frontline operators face these dangers every day. We're saddened by the news, and we extend our sincere condolences to the entire Border Patrol family. These recurrences seem to be more and more every day, and these are dangerous jobs these people have. Sit out there in the bush with them for a night and see how dangerous it is. You'll get your eyes full. If there's nothing further, recognize Mr. Culberson for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to report the bill to the full committee.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you very much. Let me make a closing statement very quick. The motion is adopted. With that, let me bring this markup to a close. I ask the staff to be able to make technical and informing edits as we prepare the bill and report for full committee circulation. I must also inform the subcommittee members we do anticipate a few members on both sides of the aisle bringing up a few issues at full committee. Issues we decided on a bipartisan basis not to include in the base bill and deter to full committee markup. In fact, I'm supporting an amendment similar to that which Chairman Adderholtz offered in a bill 2 years ago, one that is consistent with current law and ICE's current policy and practice. Once again, I sincerely thank the members of the subcommittee for their work on this important bill. I look forward to working with all of you to move it forward. At this time, the subcommittee is adjourned.